Hello, my name is Benjamin Smith on behalf of Group 3. Today I will cover lessons learned from two separate ransomware attacks that our group covered during Project 3. On our agenda today, we will cover the importance of information sharing, incident recovery, success and failure of our incident response team, as well as the organization's incident response plan and security posture in general, areas for improvement, narrowing the attack surface, and lastly, business continuity planning. Communication is inherently a major challenge of any operation or organization. There will always be a level of assumption that others have the same understanding or information knowledge that you do. However, a failure to achieve a shared understanding can result in knowledge or intelligence gaps, redundant or wasted efforts, organizational inaction, and an overall failure to meet an organization's goals. As cybersecurity threats evolve rapidly, it is likely that we will be aware of emerging threats through attacks or close calls, as it is unlikely that our adversaries will voluntarily disclose new tactics and new techniques to us prior to a successful attack or near attack. Considering that the intent of Five Eyes in general is just to strengthen our security posture through information and intelligence sharing as an alliance in lieu of operating in isolation, it makes sense that we would be keen and hip to share intelligence and information as much as possible. This implies to conventional asymmetric cyber operations and other operations as applicable. This doesn't just apply to international and third-party information sharing that we'd like to share. It also applies to to internal operations, even within our own organization. For example, the best example would be it is likely that the United States intelligence and law enforcement organizations would have had enough information to detect and possibly deter the September 11th attacks of 2001, but failed to communicate and share information prior to. So here are some examples of cyber intelligence that should be shared. The strength of an alliance is sharing information relating to historical incidents that can create lessons learned. Some of the key ones here we want to focus on are the indicators of compromise, as well as general defense strategies, particularly when it relates to emerging cyber attacks, new technology, maybe attack vectors we're unaware of, given that most automated tools we have to prevent attacks are geared towards known and historical attacks. This can be an asset we have that can help share for something new coming down the pike, so we can preemptively be prepared to work against, and should be the primary focus within Five Eyes as a whole, but really any organization that operates. So in the first attack, which was a phishing attack, or the attack vector was a phishing email, the incident response team was able to respond and even thwart the attack shortly after it had been successful through the following steps. First, conducted a packet analysis where we were able to detect the source of the attack and locate the file storage that was related directly to the attack. So we didn't only find where it came from, but the actual engine, if you will. We're even able to conduct some crypto analysis to discover the location of a decryption key. We discovered a hashed password at the bottom of a file that was located on that server that we're able to use using conventional password cracking software. And then we noticed on the file share server there was an out of place image that kind of seemed unusual, and it was a hidden steganography file, which had a key executable. When looking through that, we were able to see that it contained the necessary information to actually obtain that key, and therefore the team was actually able to decrypt all of the information that was on our server, therefore taking away, basically ruining the attack and making us operational, with the exception of potential backdoors. But from what we could see on this attack, our IR team was not only able to identify what was going on, but correct the issue. So the second attack was a ransomware attack. However, the focus on this one was an insider attack. So our approach was a more heuristically based investigation instead of a technical one, where we were able to go through technically and solve the issue. So the attack was likely due to removable media. The challenge in determining suspicious behavior between two employees, as well as confirming that the other employees or any third-party interests were not involved. That's not something we were able to deduce from our investigation, confirm or deny. However, we were able to deduce a lot of information. There was a significant challenge as the computer used to launch the attack was accessible to multiple employees. Which led to kind of a lack of non-repudiation, which made a challenge to confirm who was responsible. There were two employees in particular, but we could not clearly say, based on our investigation, that it was clearly one of the two of them who was solely responsible and directly responsible. So for successes, most of the successes really go within our incident response team. They were notably successful on the first attack's response. The phishing email, which caused the ransomware attack, that's quite common to have these type of attacks. However, a quick and successful response leading to a return to normal operations and essentially a minimal recovery, especially in relates to a ransomware attack within a reasonable time frame, is quite uncommon, if not unheard of. The team was able to discover the source of the attack, find key information regarding how the attack worked and what ran it, and then was even able to have an immediate recovery as they were able to decrypt our server without issue. The IR team was not as successful. The IR team was so successful that the information could have been passed off to the authorities, and the source of the attack was open to offensive operation had that been the scope of our IR team's mission set. They could have launched a counter-offensive attack. However, that's not the scope of IR team, just noticing how successful they were, where essentially our team had the upper hand in that arena compared to our adversaries. The IR team was a little less successful in the second attack, but they were still able to deduce a lot. They were able to narrow the investigation down likely to two individuals, and they were able to figure out the source of the attack being the thumb drive. There are several areas where cybersecurity measures have failed during this. First off, the employee received a phishing email which was not sorted by a spam filter, or as we could tell was identified as from an unknown or third-party sender. They were not within our PKI system to confirm the identity and cause from it. Ideally, that email should not even have made it to that individual's email box. Second, the removable media was allowed on system machines. Those type of USB ports were not blocked. They were able to put their removable media directly into the machine. This poses a significant threat as removable media is taken from machines, can be internally and externally from the network, and then is brought directly in, and they could be infected with they could be infected without knowledge, or and in this circumstance it could be used as a potential attack vector that circumvents firewalls and all of our network-based intrusion detection or prevention systems. Third, when it comes to employee awareness, the employees must be educated on proper practice and procedures related to cybersecurity, and in this case, email. I know it's kind of common to blame the employees. However, humans are prone to error, and this was a very avoidable mistake. But since they're prone to error, they're always going to remain to be an attractive target. And lastly, employees should be limited in their administrative privileges. An employee should not be allowed to just run executable files and code, to even include updates, which can lead towards a failure to implement the proper least privilege, separation of duties. No one should really have God access. In all these circumstances, a single employee was able to start something that led to an entire drive or area being encrypted and taken down. In general, here are some of the areas for recommended improvement. An organization cannot respond if they are unaware attack has even occurred. So some corrections can include a host and network intrusion detection systems, prevention systems, and email site security. IDS systems should be kind of behavioral based rather than to operate off of historical known attacks, so kind of more of a smart IDS. Additionally, removable media is kind of high risk for malware. we can lean forward into saying system security scanning, where the removable media can be scanned or encrypted prior to use or exposure to outside drives. But I still would recommend relying more on shared drives, networks which can be monitored and can be within inside of our own firewalls and traditional security defenses, where they require some level of authentication to get on, as well as it can be integrity of sending of the information, and other encryption methods can be implemented. Lastly, employees should have initial or periodic cybersecurity training in order to reduce the risk of human error. It's always going to be there, but it can reduce the risk of human error mistakes, and particularly when it comes to complacency, which can lead to breaches, successful social engineering attack, and even just complacency, which leads to data leaks. So when it comes to security awareness improvements, as previously stated, cybersecurity awareness training programs are beneficial, and they're key to addressing one of the biggest vulnerabilities we continuously or will have as an organization, which is our user. Employees must be aware of proper procedure and policy, how to reduce the risk of an incident occurring, how to respond if an incident actually occurs, and kind of most importantly to having the biggest benefit is the impact of what failure to comply. Kind of bring it home that saying, hey, failure to comply will result in the following. It could be quite a catastrophe, quite an embarrassing situation, and most people do not want to risk being the cause of that. And then in order to build shared understanding and to keep cybersecurity a policy and a topic of conversation within the culture of the company, recommend sending out newsletters, having it mentioned at meetings, kind of just having it be something that's on people's forefront, not just a mandatory box to check when they take the training, or something that gets even kind of just tossed aside. It needs to be ingrained in the culture, especially as we are increasingly interconnected in our operations. It's not something they want to think about when you were just first time you're thinking about it when you enter response mode. And with NSE policy, it has to be tested and validated. This can be done via penetration testing and even just anonymous employee surveys that just kind of test the awareness, see where everyone's knowledge is at without a fear of getting things wrong. It's not necessarily a test. So when it comes to patch management, so the benefits is that security patching allows for an organization to fill security gaps of known gaps, such as zero-day attacks or known attack vectors from emerging threats, or even to kind of verify or fix compliance within regulation standards or policies. If the policy changes or there are kind of flaws written where there was a lack of adherence to policy prior to it beginning, this kind of allows us to comply and be in line as needed. Patching allows for an organization to correct vulnerabilities without having to just complete a brand new software development lifecycle process, both time and in monetary cost. It's far more cost effective, takes far less time. Additionally, and while attackers are always looking for new ways to create and find and exploit vulnerabilities, most attackers attempt to exploit known vulnerabilities, and this is due to the fact that many of them have known attack vectors and tools that can be used to implement them. They know these vulnerabilities are likely there. They're willing to risk that they're there, and it's much more time efficient. They want to go in, they want to attack the vulnerable, and they want to move on. And especially, there's a lot of the common vulnerabilities remain uncorrected due to complacency, due to cost, due to ignorance. All these factors could lead to them not being corrected. In general, the first thing we want to do to improve our security is just to narrow our attack surface. What that means is give less general forward-facing or public-facing windows that an adversary can attempt to attack us from to begin with. So inherently, the less of attack surface we have, the less vulnerabilities we have. So in general, the more complex a plan or system, the more likely there will be a gap, whether that be through communication, knowledge, security, that one of those will occur. In essence, people can overcomplicate things to the point of diminishing returns. We should strive to have the smallest public forward-facing aspects of our network, and the over-complexity to the network not only does not only result in disorganization, and it actually results does not improve our strength. In fact, it is more likely that there will be a gap, or the organization will be unaware of a gap or incident occurring due to an over-complex network. Simplicity in this circumstance aids in the creation and implementation of policy and patching, but also increases the awareness of the status of the network. Additionally, to narrow our attack surface, just kind of continuously identify vulnerabilities. Some vulnerabilities will always persist. However, to identify those, we have kind of three methods that we've identified to visualize them. One is attack surface modeling, where we create a real-world model of the attack, and by showing prime network targets and network topologies, showing potential attacker paths. So kind of just providing a visual of how an attacker may attack. Next could be attack simulation. This is where we actually go through scenarios where it demonstrates how a potential attacker could traverse the network and exploit said vulnerabilities. And last is kind of patch simulation, which helps identify the patches that would have had the largest impact on network security to kind of attempt to prioritize. So lastly, we're looking at segmentation of the network. So trenches in World War I were built in a zigzag trench pattern. The reason for this is that enemy troops who were actually able to breach the trench did not have a straight line of sight or field of fire when they would get into the trench, and they couldn't quickly continue their offensive straight down a straight line. And therefore the zigzags kind of made it difficult for them to continue their offensive. So they only controlled a small portion of the trench, and then therefore friendly forces that were still in the trench could use their knowledge, knowledge of the trench, to contain those forces, those enemy forces that were in there, and as well as combat the attack, as they now regained the advantage, as that was a compartmentalized area of the attack. They didn't have all the trench just because they had one area of the trench. Similarly, looking at segmentation of a network compartmentalizes a network's defenses to reduce the impact of successful attack. In essence, the breach of one area of the network does not mean they have that they can control the entire network. This also coincides with separation of duties and the concept of least privilege. But when you have it segmented, if it's done effectively, an attack, once it's identified, the organization might be able to identify the source of the attack, blacklist that attacker to prevent them from coming back in or continuing their attack, and even gain enough information that will help the investigation that will follow before the attacker can cover their tracks and get out. So one of our biggest things we addressed with our lessons learned was the importance of business continuity operations planning. So security is the main concern within any organization. The reason is the most important is because security is needed to support operations. It's something that's in the background, but when you don't have it, operations cannot persist. The first step in a business continuity plan is to identify what is critical to the organization. Once you've done that, you identify the risk to what's going to happen if any of those critical assets are compromised, and then establish the scale, the extent of security controls, which must be tailored to the organization's needs. So when getting down to drilling down on how to actually do that, we believe the key is to maintain operations is adherence to security fundamentals. Overall, successful teams focus on mastering the basics and then building upon them, rather trying to be really good at advanced tactics, concepts, and ideas. So in this case, this includes firewalls to add barriers to outside entities, and IDSs, IPSs to identify and potentially stop anomalies and unusual behavior. We must accept that an attack or outage is likely to occur, if not definite. Therefore, leaning towards off-site operations, which could include cold, warm, and maybe even hot sites if budgetary and operational constraints allow, is key, as well as on and off-site data backups as frequently and often as possible, as live as possible, whether through the cloud or whether through removable media means. This is all kind of nested under a disaster recovery plan. And lastly, maintaining an incident response plan, which establishes how the organization will respond prior to the incident. This plan must be reviewed, rehearsed, tested, and revised. Similar to cybersecurity, it must be a living, breathing document and part of our culture. An IR team should have dedicated in its resources to allow hopefully a full-time team, not something it's just someone's additional duties, where these individuals in the IR team are properly funded and trained and familiar with the system in all ways. This is just, it's not something that we want to try to patchwork or throw together in the face of the incident. All right, brings us to our questions. Do I have any questions? Thank you for everybody's time. Again, my name is Benjamin Smith. On behalf of Group 3, I want to thank you. Have a good day. Take care.